All right. Can you feel it? Penn State, just a single win away from an opportunity at their first national championship since 1986. Don't start with the I got screwed in 1994 stuff. We know. We're here for you.
That was Scott Paterno today.
Shawn, Kane, Cory Lestochi will be breaking down the Orange Bowl matchup. The only thing standing in the way of James Franklin and company and his Nittany Lions, the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. Full preview and predictions coming at you live in just 1 second. Please make sure to like the video and subscribe on YouTube. And if you haven't, make sure you're subscribed on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Let's get right into the show. Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. I'm Cory Lestochi. With me, as always, the great Shawn Kane. How you doing today, Shawn?
Not too bad, Cory. You kind of went into like our former PA announcer, Dean. You kind of sounded a little bit like him.
I had a little Dean DeVore to me there.
Yes, Dean DeVore. I forgot his last name. Yeah, not these new guys. Dean DeVore.
First down, Penn State.
Saquon Barkley.
Yeah. I'm not going to start the show with talking about how much I miss him. But,
yeah, important thing on Thursday coming up. So
yes, absolutely. Shawn, how are you doing?
Good. Well, the Dolphins were put out of their misery. I'm kind of happy about it. That I don't have to watch them go up to lose by like 15 to Buffalo. So that's kind of a blessing in disguise. And now I'm completely focused on the Penn State Nittany Lions.
As your focus should be.
Yes, and I was saying to Cory pre-show, I don't think I've ever wanted to win more than this one. Chance to go to the national championship and we get to beat Notre Dame. Or, other hand, we lose to Notre Dame. Man, that would be a tough way to go out, being one game away from the title.
Yeah, it's a double jeopardy, so to speak, here. I mean, I'm trying to think back. You know, we've been doing this podcast now for a couple seasons. I think this is obviously the most important game we've ever covered,
yes.
Previewed.
Because Cory hates the whole "this is the biggest game ever" thing. I know, like, that's something that gets on Cory's nerves. So if he's saying that, this is important.
It's a big one.
Yes.
No doubt it's a big one. You can ask Maddie this. I'm always in the middle of like a third down series. I'm that dad that's always like, this is the game right here.
Yeah, big third down here as opposed to the small third downs.
Exactly. Well, welcome into the show, everybody. If you're new here, we've been, podcasting here about Penn State football for the last couple of years, and we are going to preview the Orange Bowl between Penn State and Notre Dame. Penn State will be wearing blue. The Irish will be wearing white. No idea what their pants will be. Probably gold, but it might be white, might be blue, might be.
Yeah, that I don't know. I know they
green.
change their pants a lot. I don't think it'll be green.
No, I don't.
Do
think
they have
so
green pants? I know they wear green jerseys sometimes.
I think that they wear like all green versus Michigan one year, like true green.
They may have, and then they have that Shamrock series too, and the uniforms are never nice for. I don't know why they do that.
Terrible.
Like, you have one of the most traditional like uniforms in sports, and you're just like, we're gonna wear these really ugly uniforms once a year.
What do you think about them putting the names on the back of the jersey?
Again, I don't like it. Like, you're Notre Dame, and I'm the biggest Notre Dame hater ever. But you have these iconic uniforms. Just wear them. It's the same thing with Ohio State. Like, Ohio State has awesome uniforms, and then they'll wear black or gray uniforms.
Okay, the ones they wore in 2017 I actually liked.
I did not like them, but teach their own. But still, like, a game like that, it was a top 5 matchup. Just wear your scarlet. I don't understand it. I guess their fans may like it. I don't know how that would go over here. Because
don't think we're coming out in alternates on Thursday?
I mean, you never know. They could do the well, we're not going to be breaking out the pink and blacks But you never know. They could do the Generations of Greatness. I don't think so, but
All right. So I pulled a fast one on Shawn was it this morning? It's been a long day. I asked you guys on X if you would provide me with what the headlines would be following the game on Thursday night, what would they be on Friday morning, or what people would be saying on X, because I don't know if people really still read newspapers. Sorry for anybody who listens to us that's a beat reporter that actually still has like a newspaper. But anyway, and so I have some of the ones that our fans came up with. Am I allowed to call them fans? Followers on Twitter? They're our fans today. But before we get to those, Shawn, you were going to take if Penn State were to lose, and I was going to take if Penn State were to win. This has no influence on who we're picking at the end of the show today. We're simply just trying to play out both scenarios for the hell of it. So, Shawn, if Penn State were to lose on Thursday night, what would the headline be, or what would the trolls on X be saying on Friday morning, or probably Thursday, like 11?
well, I mean, the low-hanging fruit here is James Franklin loses ... again.
Yeah.
I think that's the obvious one. If you go into another big-time matchup and we lose again, I mean, it's just going to be plastered everywhere. And I still wouldn't call this season a failure if you did, but man, it's a huge missed opportunity if you lose this game.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what was echoed on X. Probably 90% of what was happening. I think if Penn State were to win, I'm going to take this a little bit more positive. I think maybe it's not going to be the loudest thing said, but I think one thing that is going to be said is maybe SMU and Boise State weren't that bad. Maybe those teams having SMU having to go on the road in the frozen tundra and having to play on the road in Beaver Stadium against the second best team in the country or first best team in the country, maybe not that easy of a thing to do after all, especially when you throw 2 pick sixes. So take a little bit more positive there. Right now, the spin is Penn State hasn't played anybody yet, which obviously, Penn State fans are used to that expression. But I do think if Penn State were to win this game, people, maybe it wouldn't be the first thought, but maybe the third or fourth thought would be, maybe SMU and Boise State are actually pretty decent. I mean, they were able to play with 1 or 2 team in the country. So going to take a little bit more positive route and say that's one of the things that would come out of a Penn State win.
Yeah, I think so too. I could definitely see that. That's a cool angle that you did. Because keep in mind too, Notre Dame has their dumb agreement with the ACC where they play, I don't know, X amount of games per year, but they're not official members because they're above that. And one of the teams they didn't play was SMU, and SMU only lost 1 game in conference. They lost to BYU, and then they only lost 1 game in conference to Clemson in the championship game. So it makes you wonder how they would have stacked up against them. I actually think it could have been a good game. I think Notre Dame would probably win. But SMU, I don't think they're a slouch.
Shawn, but before you get off that point completely, I just want to say teams that Notre Dame did not play in the ACC this year. And I'm going to do it in order of the standings. SMU, Clemson, Miami, Syracuse. Then they played Louisville and Georgia Tech. And then they missed Duke. And they missed Virginia Tech. Basically, the teams they played are all at the bottom of this damn thing. Virginia, UNC. They didn't even play Pitt.
Did they play
Stanford,
Cal?
Florida State. I don't think they played Cal, but don't quote me on that.
Played Cal either.
I don't think they played Cal.
Cal's a little frisky, but they're not
frisky,
that good.
but they ended up 2-6 in the conference. But
yeah.
So my point being 1, 2, 3, 4. They didn't play the top 4 best teams in the ACC.
Yeah. I mean, they seem to always like skate by with that for whatever reason. And not to say they haven't beat anybody. They beat Indiana soundly in the playoff. And then they beat Georgia by 2 scores. So I'm not going to say, they didn't play anybody, because actually they did. It just didn't come to the playoffs. They beat a pretty good Texas A&M team. as well to
USC.
kick this. And they beat USC both on the road. So I'm not going to say they haven't played anybody, but it's fair to say, people compared their schedule to Penn State's, and I didn't think if that was too valid of an argument. I mean, we played Oregon and Ohio State, albeit Oregon at the conference championship game, but still before the playoffs. So I didn't really buy that going into the playoff that, neither of them played anybody. Yeah, well, Penn State played better teams on a week in, week out basis. Do you want my other negative headline?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I just ended the clip that I was recording, but yes, go ahead. This won't make it in the clip, but that's okay.
Okay. Drew Aller, overrated?
Ooh.
I
didn't ask you for a second one, and then you just happen to have that one like.
Oh, I thought we were doing a couple of these.
I mean, you can. I feel like you're just now attacking Penn State for no reason.
No,
I'll give you a great one here from Mudbug. He says, and the Penn State Nittany Lions will play for the national championship. Either that or Mudbug. Hope you're doing okay. Hope you're doing okay regardless, Mudbug. One from Dorito Bandit, positive one, on a serious note. From Dorito Bandit, man, Omari Evans really stepped up with 2 touchdowns and 100 yards receiving. So there's Dorito Bandit expecting a big game from Omari Evans if they were to win the game.
Could happen.
Do you have another one, Shawn, that you want to reel out there negatively? And then I'm going to share my favorite one.
All right.
You go first.
All right. I could elaborate a little on the Drew one. All right, I'll give you another one. Another negative. Penn State's run game shuts down again against a top-tier opponent.
Yeah, you're really starting to bum me out, and I came with a lot of excitement.
Well, it could happen because now the last 3 games, Penn State has been excellent at running them. But people would say, well, that's against SMU and Boise State, and Oregon's defense ended up being fake news. Like, people do this thing in their head when they're trying to work backwards from a conclusion, and they would be able to just say, well, look how they did against Ohio State, and look how they did against Michigan last year. Now they play Notre Dame, and the run game shuts down again.
That's fair. All right, I got 2 more good ones from the X universe here. Hardcore PSUFB is where you can find us. This is I'm gonna do the second best one, then I'll save the best one for last. Second best one. Where'd it go? Oh, this is from Da ASNL PSU. So that's how they lost to Northern Illinois.
Oh, I like that angle.
Yeah, that was fun. I like that one.
Because I got to be honest, the thought's been in the back of my head all week. Like, this team did lose to Northern Illinois.
For people that just joined us, if you're wondering what the hell we're doing, we are coming up with fake headlines that people may be saying post-game, whether they win or lose. We haven't just picked our games yet. We're just throwing hypotheticals out there. Shawn's not this negative, I don't think.
No. It's the tonal change. I promise.
Benny's Nation on YouTube says this is the game where Rojas shows up on a national scene. So maybe a little headline there. Shawn, do you have one more, or should I give off the best one that we got by far?
All right. I'll give off. I think if I could think of a negative one. Penn State's defensive tackle's too small? ?
Oh, God.
Remember that one?
Jesus,
I'm not saying I even agree with it. But we'll see it.
We missed Hakeem Beefman.
I mean, I kind of think that could end up being valid at some point. That we kind of miss Hakeem Beefman.
All right. Last funny one, and then we're going to get serious here. This is from J-Mart. By the way, their Twitter handle is PSU Natty 2024. So, again, something somebody would be saying post the game. J-Mart says, quote, I can't believe Elsdon had that pick 6.
I would. I don't know what I would do if Tyler Elson had a pick six against anybody, but especially in a game like this.
And then Lambda comes in with I think the most obvious one that I think most fans told us was Penn State still hasn't beaten anyone good. I think there's an expectation that we're gonna see that at some point. But
I could have probably used that as a negative headline.
Yeah.
Like, well, it's Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And look, that would happen even if we won the title. Because right. I know what the argument's going to be if we win the title. I already know what it's going to be. They won with 2 losses.
They didn't win the conference championship.
Yep, I already know. I've already thought 2 steps ahead.
All right, well, we'll welcome in hardcore Penn State football. That's a fun thing. I probably saw something on X this morning that made me think of the idea. And so I probably can't take full credit for it, but I wish I had kind of conjured that up a little bit more earlier. We'll do that obviously more. Maybe we'll do it in a blue and white game. I don't know how we could be positive or negative, but we'll do that again in a blue and white game, by the way. Like what, 3 months and 3 weeks away. So the nice thing about playing into January is blue and white comes a lot quicker. And we always say, Shawn, that day. Oh, really? We always say that once blue and white's over, the summer goes by quick and we're already in football season again. So nice of Penn State to make it this far because we're going to have a lot shorter of an off season, like dramatically shorter of an off season, which I'm pretty excited about. But welcome in everybody in chat. We got a live one today. I want to go back up to the top real quick. DJ Bennett says, I'm a classic, quote, biggest play of the game. And I say that 10 times a game. He says, big fan of the show. Great work, guys. And he gives us his predictions. So please feel free to drop your predictions in the chat throughout the episode today. He goes with Penn State 24, Notre Dame 13. So he's got an 11-point win for the Nittany Lions. Cory Joyce coming after you, Shawn. He says, watch your mouth about the Shamrock series. So I don't know. Is that one of your buddies?
Yes, that is one of my buddies.
Is he a Notre Dame fan?
Oh, he is massive Notre Dame fan.
Right. So we have some
together. So
we've been infiltrated, is what you're saying.
Yes. Okay. He told me he'd be watching tonight. So hey, Cory.
Shawn, I think we should start just base layer it with what we know about both teams going in because both teams coming in with injuries. You know what? Next year I'm getting a little pitch count, and we're gonna keep track of the bumps and bruises. I feel like I got to like 4 before the season started in summer camp. I don't know what the bumps and bruises count is at, but I want to say it's probably close to like 69, if I had to guess. It's got to be right around there. So I'm going to say bumps and bruises count 69. Both teams coming with bumps and bruises. Both teams got some important players that are potentially going to be limited. Obviously, the biggest one, probably the best player on either side of the line of scrimmage, and that's Abdul Carter. Really has made a lot of nerdy beat writers have to figure out all of these different Penn State memes with all of the allusions to Darth Vader in the last couple of days. Shawn, I will just say this, and I told you guys this whenever we had, I guess, last Thursday. I fully expect Abdul Carter to play. I said that on last Thursday's show. I don't see where he will be 100%, and I don't see a situation where he's playing every down. I really think he's going to probably be utilized in 2 ways. Number 1, 3rd down long situations where they're pinning their ears back and going after him. And number 2, in 3rd and medium and 3rd and long situations or legmium, where they're worried about Riley Leonard's ability to run and he's going to spy. I don't know who posted this on X. I think it was a comment to Landon Tangwa, but somebody mentioned situation where he doesn't have to put his arm, his shoulder in a situation where he's attacking an offensive lineman for 40 snaps a game. He can sit there and spy Riley Leonard. And I know Riley Leonard's hard to get to the ground, but I'm confident that Carter with a bum shoulder can still get Riley Leonard to the ground, and he has the speed. His legs are fine. He still can chase down people. So in my opinion, that's where we're going to see Abdul Carter is in those 2 situations. I don't necessarily think we're going to see him every down Maybe he tries in the first series, but after that, I expect Amin Vanover to get majority of the snaps, and they use Abdul Carter on pressure situations, when they gotta have it moments. The DJ Bennett, this is the game moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I would pretty much agree with that. You could even make an argument this person spying a Riley Leonard, that's the most important person on our defense. Because if you take away Riley Leonard's legs or limit him, that is as my grandpa likes to say, they become a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest on offense. Because Leonard's just not much of a threat to throw the ball. Not that he can't, but he just doesn't go downfield very much. But where he will kill you is with is running the ball. So when you combined, and to be clear, we don't know exactly what the injury is. I think he's going to play, but maybe limited. So probably not the best to go one-on-one against Notre Dame's offensive line the whole game. And good thing he is definitely cross-chained at linebacker, so he knows how to play the position. And you get to have him and Amin Vanover and Nittany Sutton on the field at the same time to be able to go after Riley Leonard and to speed him up a little bit.
Exactly. I like where your head's at. I will just mention what Cowboy Ribeye said on YouTube. He said, "I'm sure that the best defensive end in the country can tackle Riley Leonard with no arms." So there you have it. Thank you, Cowboy Ribeye, for that. Let's go to the other big injury, and that is running back for Notre Dame, Jeremiah Love. MCL injury against was it against Indiana when he first heard it? I don't remember, but he re-aggravated it against Georgia. Didn't look great against Georgia. Had the nice run against Indiana before the injury. Didn't look great against Georgia at all. Didn't look like himself. He was in like this sleeve cast for a couple days, and then he was in a brace when he was seen at practice. And he practiced with the second team. Now, 44 minutes ago, ESPN's Andrea Adelson said that, hey, he is going to be playing, but they don't expect him to probably be 100%. Now, Shawn, I don't know if this is the place to do it, but I'm going to just do it here anyway. I've seen a lot of conversations around, it's Penn State's running back duo versus Notre Dame's running back duo. Stop. No disrespect to Notre Dame's backs. I think Jeremiah Love is a fantastic running back. I also, in fact, in that Georgia game, 100% think that Jadarian Price looked better in that game, and he looked really good. But the bottom line is they did not have a true running back 1A and 1B like Singleton and Allen. They had a more Jeremiah Love is number 1 and Price is number 2. Price in the entire season only ran or only carried the ball double digits 5 times. And 2 of those were games where Jeremiah Love was hurt. So I don't think it's fair to say they have a true, duo like Penn State does, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. In the Louisville game, Price had 3 carries. In the Northern Illinois game, which they lost, he had 4 carries. Virginia, he had 6 carries. Navy, he had 5 carries. That's not a duo. That is a true, your number 1 came out and your backup came in for a series kind of situation there. I don't mean it in a way that like they're not good. They're very, very talented, but they don't have a true 1A, 1B system like Penn State does. And they didn't use them in that manner throughout the season. And why I bring that up is Penn State's running backs are probably a little bit fresher. Obviously, Jeremiah, Love is banged up right now. And it has paid dividends for them to balance those two, because now they have both, not just healthy Shawn, but they have both of them red hot at the right time. And I don't think you could have really chalked that up any better if you're James Franklin over the last 3 years, have both of your, star running backs, since they were freshmen, to be amped, locked in, and healthy as you head into the semifinal. And with all due respect, that is not what Notre Dame has, and it's not the situation they're currently in.
Yeah, Penn State has a pretty unique running back duo in that they both came in together. They both get a lot of carries every week. And the idea, on top of them just complementing each other really well, is keeping each other fresh. And that's the benefit of them, especially, late third, fourth quarter, when the other team's defense is tired. You still have two relatively fresh backs. I will say that Price, his carries have been steadily increasing. Even had 10 carries against Army, 12 against USC, 11 against Indiana, 10 against Georgia. Now, 2 of those, Love was hurt or limited. So I'm expecting he'll probably have something in that neighborhood, maybe even a little bit more, because I'll just tell you, a running back running with a brace on his knee, he ain't going to play. He's not going to be as impactful as Notre Dame fans have been used to seeing. It's just not. It's just not going to be. I'm not saying he won't play. He'll probably give it a go, but I'm not anticipating, a heavy dose of him. I think most of the carries are going to be from Jadarian Price. And look, he's a good player. He's averaging 6.5 yards a carry. He started a lot of different places in the country, and he's. Do I think he's good enough to theoretically beat Penn State if he was getting the lion's share of the carries? Yeah, I do. I think he could do it. So he is no slouch. But yeah, Penn State's duo is very unique in a lot of different ways. Not just the way they complement each other, but just the whole thing, how they came in together. It's just not something you see a lot in college football these days.
Exactly. Their backup to the backup running back, Aeneas Williams. He's a freshman. He looked good in some action he got in the in their Sugar Bowl as well. 32 carries for him on the year, so small sample size there. Does have a 6.3 yards per carry. And as somebody already kind of ruined, if you've forgotten about him, Cowboy everybody would like to remind you of Devin Ford, who is their 4th string running back. So theoretically could be the 3rd string running back, does some things on special teams as well. But keep an eye out for Mr. Devin Ford. So yeah, so I went down a little tangent there on the running backs, and I'm sure we'll talk more about the running backs in a little bit, but felt like that was a good place as we were talking about Jeremiah Love there, where we could sneak that part in. Don Hartman says Penn State 63, Notre Dame 14. So don't even worry, turn it off at halftime situation.
Let's do it.
All right. One other injury I wanted to mention, like if you go and look at Notre Dame's injuries, like yes, Penn State obviously has had a lot of injuries too. Notre Dame's had a bunch of injuries, whether it's at the corner position, the defensive end position. One other player I wanted to mention, if I could, is along the defensive line. Shawn, maybe maybe Chad knows. I don't know the latest news on him, but I don't expect a bunch out of defense lineman Howard Cross the third. I think he's going to play, but I hadn't heard any specific information as far as I feel like we would consider Jeremiah Love doubtful in the sense that he'll probably give it a go, but I'm not expecting a bunch. I think Howard Cross is more probable than that, but I don't know how much of an impact he's going to make.
Yeah, he did practice the other night. I know in Notre Dame's media availability. But yeah, he's been in and out of the lineup. I know he missed a few weeks late in the year. So yeah, I would expect him to play. But like you said, just how beat up Notre Dame is, I do think at some point it's probably going to catch up with them. But I just got to say too, Marcus Freeman's a great coach. I hate giving Notre Dame compliments, but man, just the departure from Brian Kelly And what I think this team probably would have looked like after all these injuries, Brian Kelly, as opposed to Marcus Freeman, just keeping them not only engaged but playing so well. Um, it's a huge hats off to him. But yeah, I think at some point these injuries are gonna add up and probably cost them. Not saying when though. Yeah.
Are you trying to not say something?
Well, we have to get to that later in the show.
Corey Joyce says he will start. Expect Rubio and Hinesh to get a heavy dose. Yeah, and again, like guys, they got. I don't want to say like their defensive line is not as good as Ohio State's, but they have. They're the second best defensive line Penn State's faced.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, I would agree with that.
This sounds dumb, and maybe I'm completely off here, but I still think Illinois has one of the better defensive lines they played, which take that for what you will. But
I think statistically they do. And I have a theory Illinois is like the most underrated team in the country too.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody just like craps on them and all they do is win games. Yeah.
Do the fake substitution thing there.
One
take state says Nick can juke his way for a long run, but will get stuffed more than he breaks. Skatron will bruise his way better. We'll see what happens with the running game. We'll talk more about that in a second. Okay, we talked injuries. I think let's go to special teams next. Let's just kind of basically ignore all the fun stuff. We kind of talked about running backs already, but let's talk a little bit about special teams. Shawn, I know he's not the Jeter, but he is a Jeter, and you are a Yankees fan. So why don't you go ahead and talk about Mr. Jeter?
Well, he combined my cat's name, which is Mitch, with Yankee hero Derek
I hadn't seen
Jeter.
Mitch for a while. I hadn't seen Mitch.
Mitch is sleeping right now in his bed, like right in front of me. So he is.
You guys used to watch us like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Mitch made cameos quite often, but not as much lately.
Back in his kitten days. But yeah, Mitch Jeter struggled bus all year for him kicking. Notre Dame really didn't like kicking much early in the year, partly because I don't think they trusted Mitch Jeter very much. But I gotta say, he's been good lately. He's only missed one kick in the past 2 games. One kick against Indiana. Again, that was in the middle of a snowstorm. And he also made another kick that day, and he made 3 against Georgia. So I think he may have found a little bit of a hot streak here. But yeah, for the year, he's still, even with that, only kicking at 61%. So still not great. If you're Notre Dame, do you really trust this guy with your season on the line? If you need some kicks late, I probably wouldn't. And I don't know if Marcus Freeman necessarily will. You know, if there's a 4th and 3 at the 27, what are they going to do? I think they're going to go for it. I think they're going to say, we're going to trust our run game. We're going to go for this. We trust it way more than we trust our kicker, who has found a hot streak. But that's just kind of where I'm at right now. So I would not trust that. I would not trust Mitch Jeter in a big time spot. But credit to him, he seems to be turning around at least a little bit here.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to mention. I was probably going to talk about this more in the red zone side of things. But Notre Dame will go for a lot of 4th downs where they could kick field goals in the red zone. Like Marcus Freeman is completely on board with let's just go for it. And if we don't get it, where you don't think you're going to be able to go 80 yards, 90 yards on our defense. So if they get in a 4th and 4, 4th and 3 situation, expect Marcus Freeman to say, you know what? I think Riley Leonard, I think, Faison, I think somebody can pick me up 4 or 5 yards here. I'm going to go ahead and roll the dice because I got the defense behind us. So be interesting if he sticks to that aggressive mindset. But it's kind of funny because they are probably, even though they could kick those field goals, they're probably going to go for it. And then the longer ones kind of sets up your kicker to not have a very good kicking percentage when you only ask him to kick like 40 and 50 yarders versus some of those chip shots when you play conservative.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Where are you missing from is a big thing. Um, but yeah,
gonna,
I mean they're going to be aggressive, and you can't really blame them for being aggressive in a game like this.
I wanted to talk about punting. James Rendell, first of all, avoid whatever the hell Texas was. It Texas? Who it was a was it, who was the team in the last round who hit the punter 2 times in a row? Is that
Oh, it's
Texas?
Texas.
Yeah. I've never seen somebody have 2 running into the punters back to back like that. That was
Oh,
kind
the
of strange.
punting.
Or that wasn't the Georgia Notre Dame game, was
That
it?
was the Georgia Notre Dame game.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought you meant the kicker that kept missing.
No. But that was funny. That was the Georgia player doing it twice to Mr. James Rendell. Kind of crazy, but this dude is a weapon in his own right. Not a bunch inside the 20, but averaging over 40 yards per punt. Had a long of 64. Had a really good game against Georgia, and you start seeing scores for this game, and it starts feeling like a field position type of game. Feel like the punting sort of favors Notre Dame here versus Riley Tompkins.
Yeah, I do hope we can get Riley going. I thought he did okay in the Fiesta Bowl. I know he won Special Teams Player of the Week from the staff. But he did shank one early in the game, but the rest of the game he was good. But yeah, in a game like this, field position could be at a premium, and it's going to be good conditions, it seems, to punt. The only thing you have to worry about Miami at this time of year is potential rain. Does not look like there's going to be rain in the forecast, so yeah, you should be able to punt it all over the yard.
Yeah, and Thompson he shanked the first one against Boise State, but after that he had a pretty good day. So hopefully he's turned that around a little bit. They're going to need a couple big ones out of him. The other thing I wanted to mention about Notre Dame's punting or kicking game in general, give a lot of credit to Marcus Freeman. He is creative about how he sets up his units. They run a decent amount of fakes, and a lot of teams don't even try to rush the kicker or even rush the punter because they're so afraid of a fake. They don't know what Marcus Freeman's up to. It seems subtle, but those little things make a little bit difference. I mean, it's one thing to block a kick, but it's another thing to not even attempt to block it. And I feel like he has almost earned the respect of some of the opposing special teams. So it's something to pay attention to, is how aggressive is Penn State in the punt blocking situations, the field goal blocking situations. Are they setting up the return for punts? Are they just playing safe the whole time in those situations? We obviously saw what they did against Georgia, where they ran, hockey line switch the entire team out on the 4th and 1, and then try to get Georgia to jump off sides. Expect something like that, some sort of flavor like that, where Marcus Freeman is, and I want to say, I don't remember what game it was, but Marcus Freeman is really good at that. At the very, very minimum, he is trying to find a way to make you at least burn a timeout before you want to. Like, I think that's what he's trying to do, is if I can do one thing to get a small advantage where you have to use a timeout where you don't want to, that's a win in my book. And he's done that really well. And I hate to say it, not that it's happened necessarily lately, but there's oftentimes Penn State has to burn a timeout because they don't have the right person on the field, or they don't have the right personnel to go for it, or they have some sort of problem like that. So in my opinion, probably get ready to be frustrated by Penn State burning a timeout at some point before they want to.
Well, Cory, we ran a fake punt once at Minnesota, so we get tricky too. Yeah, I mean, really, if you think about it though, Cory, we're not a team that goes after a ton of punts.
No.
We're really not. We're pretty safe on special teams. I think Franklin sometimes gets accused for being too conservative and then too aggressive. One thing that he is as conservative as Ted Cruz on is special teams. Outside of that fake punt, that's why the fake punt took everybody by surprise, because it's like, whoa, we never do this. And he isn't going at, so I think Freeman could try to mix in some trickeration. I don't really know if Penn State's the best team for that to work on per se, because we also cover things really well. Gabe is really, you mentioned the kick return last week. Gabe's really good at putting the ball in the end zone, especially when conditions are good. So I think that's going to be the play all day on Thursday, is just tell Gabe, just kick the stuffing out of the ball. Don't worry about angling it or whatever. And 99% of the times we don't try to do that anyway. We just like to kick the ball through the back of the end zone.
And the last thing I just have to mention, Notre Dame did have a kick return for a touchdown to open the second half against Georgia. Jaden Harrison took that back for 6. I want to reiterate in that Georgia Notre Dame game, when you go back and look at it, Notre Dame's offense didn't light anything on fire. You had the kick return for a touchdown. You had the sack for a fumble that gave them very good field position when they were able to score in a quick change. There was no long sustained drives that really ended up in touchdowns for Notre Dame. They were very fortunate by kind of the kick return game and the fumble. And Shawn, am I wrong in kind of characterizing this offense as very opportunistic? But Notre Dame has 31 takeaways on the year. How much are they relying on those takeaways, those special teams plays, those kind of mind games in order to find, shave an extra 3 points or find an extra 3 points, or, you know what I mean? I just feel like for Penn State if Penn State were to lose this game, it's because they were bamboozled at some point. Something, whether they gave it to them or they were tricked into something or they gave up a special teams. I just feel like, and again, credit Notre Dame, because it's one thing for it to happen once, but they've, at some point, it reminds me of like Iowa in 2021, when you're leading the country in takeaways. Like, yes, you are lucky to a certain degree, but also you have sustained it over now the entire season. You must be doing something right.
Well, I mean, we even saw it here with Manny Diaz, right? Being opportunistic, it's almost like being a state of mind that you're looking for it. And like, I remember before the 2022 season, whenever the media would come into practice, Manny Diaz would always do that turnover drill. It was just something they were always doing. And it's because he was trying to build that mindset. Like, yes, we're going to take the ball away from teams. And that's really what you have in this Notre Dame team. And yeah, part of it is luck, and naysayers would say, well, you're not going to be able to do that all the time. Probably true. But they are. And if you are doing it, well, then it's going to be a thing of beauty. I mean, how much does Franklin talk about winning the turnover battle? I bring this up all the time, but it's the first 2 stats he brings up every week. It's turnover margin in a game, and he brings up explosive plays. And they kind of go hand in hand, and whoever wins those, they're going to win the game. So if you're Notre Dame and you're really good in turnover margin, which they are, well, you're going to win a lot of games. That's 50% some would argue that's almost 50% of the battle right there, is just winning the turnover margin.
I mean, Franklin talks about how that's one of the most important things.
Yeah. And I mean, look at our own defense. When is our defense playing at their best? When they're creating turnovers. Our defense has been good all year, but sometimes it doesn't always feel like it. And I think a huge reason why is we go through phases where we're not turning teams over as much as we should be. So that's something that Notre Dame takes a lot of pride in, and I think you have to give Al Golden a ton of credit for that. Him and his scheme, which is very aggressive, and and to their credit, they don't get burned a ton either. So it's because sometimes you get defenses that are always trying to create turnovers, but they're over aggressive. Think like Don Brown, which was a defense that I really didn't like because it was too aggressive, and they would get sloppy in the back end, and they give up a lot of explosive plays. And you don't see that happen as much with Notre Dame. They'll get burned sometimes, but it's kind of like how we would with Manny at times.
Right. No, I agree with all that. I had something else I wanted to say to that, but I have lost that train of thought. Devin on X mentions, look, he's been tuning in for a couple years now with us, and we've seen a lot of big games, which, we were the underdogs, and it ended up in heartbreak. I'd really like this to be the week for the fan base where we finally win the big game that we're not supposed to win. Will this be the week? Can James Franklin get that theoretical monkey off his back? And I think we're going to talk a lot more about that. But I want to just mention, maybe without answering the question, like I think everyone kind of feels that way, Devin. I think everyone's kind of like, if not now, then when, kind of. And so you don't have very many opportunities to be the underdog where you're only a 1.5 point underdog. That's like the best underdog you can be. Oh yeah, they're all doubting us. Well, really, it's a coin flip, but yeah, sure.
Yeah,
it's a perfect underdog situation.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people picking Penn State too. I probably see a little bit more picking Notre Dame, but a lot of people are picking Penn State to win this game. And just like taking the temperature of the fan base, and I'm around these Twitter streets, they seem pretty confident. There's a quiet confidence, it seems like, among Penn State fans, both online and just in my personal life, that you don't always see, especially going into a big time game like this. Whenever we play Ohio State, like, there'll always be people that are going to be like, this is the year we're going to win. But generally, the feeling is, are we ever going to do this even before the game even kicks off? Where I'm not having that same feel. But on the other hand, I think Notre Dame fans feel the same way.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Before we talk more specifics, coaching, we talked about Marcus Freeman quite a bit. I think James Franklin, we had one thing I wanted to mention to your whole point about turnovers, now that it's finally come back to the old noggin. I mentioned this on the last episode. I want to reiterate it. 7 takeaways for Penn State in the playoff. They had 17 in the regular season and including the Big Ten championship. They didn't have any in the Big Ten championship, but 17 in 13 games, and they have 7-2. That helps a lot too. That helps a lot, and you feel like, again, that turnover margin. Again, Notre Dame won that 2-0 against Georgia. That, and then Notre Dame, and the way Notre Dame wants to play, that turnover margin very much could be the difference. So pay close attention, maybe even more than usual on that. But I wanted to go back to coaching. James Franklin. I'm not ready to go. I don't even know how much we really need to go in the whole big game. We get that horse has been beat to death across the internet this week. I get it. But I do want to mention how he has seemed, and he's even talked about being more aggressive since the playoff has started, which is interesting because I think a lot of the haters would probably come out and say, like, oh, James Franklin's going to be tight in these situations. Never been in the playoff before, whatever. I don't know if this is statistically true, but Marcus Freeman and James Franklin are both undefeated in the playoff. I don't know.
Never lost.
I don't know how many playoff games there's been where both coaches were undefeated in a playoff with, say, at least 2 starts. Probably not very many.
I don't think so, because Saban, I believe, lost his first playoff game.
Yeah, they lost to Ohio State.
Yeah, they lost to Ohio State.
So take him off the board right away.
Urban won his first 2, but then they didn't make it in 2015.
I don't know who they would have played. Then they lost to Clemson.
And then they lost to Clemson. Did Dabo win 2 games? No, he only won 1 in 2015. No. They lost in the title game in 15. Yes, I think this might be the first time.
I think it might be the first one. So big J journalism. So anyway, but it doesn't seem like Franklin has really tightened up, and he's been so much more aggressive, especially in the fourth quarter. I know fans are going to hate that he went for not 4th and 1. Shawn and I argued about that 2 episodes ago, whatever it was. 2 weeks ago, I guess now. But regardless of how you feel about it, you can't knock the guy for saying, I'm going to stay aggressive in the playoff if that's the message he wants to send. And, well, I guess you can knock it. But what I'm trying to say here is he is being more aggressive. And I would argue a lot of people would expect him to maybe turtle, and he hasn't. And I'm curious if that continues in this game with a lot on the line for him. Obviously, he said it's very important. He's the first coach black coach to win a national championship. This is the furthest he's ever got this Penn State team to winning a national championship. He wants to win one here at Penn State. Again, think about where they were. I made that comment about Boston College in the Pinstripe Bowl a month ago. We were there. Regardless of what Boston College is as a program, Penn State was right there in the Pinstripe Bowl basically 10 years ago. And now they are 2 wins away from national championship. Does that pressure add on, or does he continue to stay aggressive and loose? I think that's a big part of the game on Thursday night.
Well, Cory, I think in a way, I mean, historically it hasn't helped in these types of games, but it could help with the whole 1-0 mindset. Now, like I said, previously in big games, yeah, that approach hasn't really worked. But I think at a time like this, where you're playing good teams every week, like the last 3 games we played, Oregon, SMU, Boise State, now we play Notre Dame, it probably helps to kind of drown out noise to have that 1-0 mindset, to be like, look, this is obviously this is a really good team. This is a huge stage. It speaks for itself. We just got to go out there and play football, though. We have a more, in my view, I think we have a slightly more talented team. I think it's very close. If you look at recruiting rankings, we rank about the same. But I think Penn State, I believe I saw that Penn State has 5 5-star players. Notre Dame only has 1. Now, again, take that with a grain of salt, because 5-star guys don't always turn out to be 5. That's not always 5-star results. Yes, I'm not going to call anybody out here, but not every 5-star plays like a 5-star. But I do think Penn State has a bit of a talent edge, and all you got to do is go out there and play football. And that's really all it is. The game gets decided, between it gets decided on the field. So I think the 1-0 mindset could actually benefit Penn State more than it has in the past. Because the 1-0 thing, I think when you're going against an Illinois or a team like Illinois, and then you play Northwestern, and then you play Ohio State, if you just say, well, guys, this is just like Northwestern, it's kind of like, is it though? But if you're telling them, if you're coming off playing Oregon, playing SMU, going to the Fiesta Bowl and playing Boise State, that could resonate a little bit better going into a big game like this, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think what you're trying to say here too is like, people are going to crap on playing SMU and Boise State. There are a lot of teams that would not be able to go back to back to beat SMU and Boise State to then get to the semifinal. Like there are things you have to do. There are focuses you have to have. There's a certain level of not just talent, obviously, but focus you need to be able to do that. But a lot of people will discredit that.
Yeah, like imagine just going into a regular season and you see Boise State and SMU on the schedule back to back. We'd all be like, oh man, that is a tough back to back to start. Like if that was our out of conference games, right, Boise State and SMU, we'd all be like, oh man, that's gonna be really challenging. And then if we go and beat them by multiple scores, everybody would be talking about how great we are. But now that we're in the playoffs, it's just, oh well, you beat SMU and Boise, who cares?
I want to go to Benny's Nation comment here. He says, I think James Franklin trusts his offensive coordinator more, which allows him to be more aggressive. I think that's true. I also think he trusts his offensive line a lot right now, which allows him to be more aggressive too. I really think, and his quarterback too, but I really think he's, at the end of the day, you can be more aggressive. I kind of made the comment about Lincoln Riley. You can't really be aggressive and you can't close out games if you can't trust your offensive line. And right now, James Franklin's really trusting his offensive line, maybe to a fault. All right. I think we're good there. Eric Holmes talking a lot about depth issues at defensive tackle. He's talking about stunting. We're going to talk about that all in a second, as well as Drew Aller. So let's do that. Let's talk about Notre Dame's defense and more first. Defensive coordinator Al Golden. We talked about him a little bit on the last episode, former Penn State tight end. He called himself today an above average tight end in a great program. For all you Joe Paterno fans out there, he was asked about his best lesson he had learned from Joe Paterno. There's some good quotes out there if you want to listen to that entire anecdote. Al Golden didn't, and really, I think it's one of those things where you're going to look back and go, was Al Golden the problem at Miami, or is just Miami the problem at Miami? Especially when you look at Manny Diaz and some other things that's happened there. I feel like Al Golden is kind of, and maybe he's just one of those guys that are a better coordinator, but he's had a fantastic year. I don't know if he's even, did they ever announce the winners of the Broyles Award? I don't know if they did, but I really feel like he probably should win it.
I don't think they have.
he's done fantastic. And I will say this, as far as scheme goes, similar to Boise State's in the sense that they love to blitz their linebackers. Probably the biggest difference between Boise State and Notre Dame as far as their scheme goes is that in the back half, instead of playing quarters or some sort of zone coverage, they love to play, which is like a man coverage, cover one. But instead of having a single high safety, they'll use that safety more of in the middle of the field in that what they call robbing position, where they can really pick off those slant routes, keep those seam routes where maybe Tyler Warren would like to hang out in. They like to park Xavier Watts right over the middle of the field. They trust their corners out on the outside. They put a lot of pressure, including one that's a freshman corner, a lot of pressure on those guys on the outside to make plays. But their goal and their hope is they're going to stop the run, and then they're going to be able to get to you before you're able to get the ball down the field. And even if you do get the ball down the field, it's going to be a 50-50 ball, and they'll live with that every day. So that's the general mindset that they have. They twist, they text, they X, they do all of that things with their defensive linemen. They're trying to confuse you up front, very similar to what Manny Diaz loves to do. He loves to bring guys from different areas. The offensive line better be ready to communicate. Not only they're going to have to deal with the defensive line, they're going to deal with the linebackers, they're going to have to deal with like the monster backs, the nickel backs, the safeties. Blitzes are going to come from everywhere. And it's a good thing in a sense that they played Boise State because some of those blitzes are similar. But these players are a lot better than Boise State's defensive line. And so in a sense, it's similar to Ohio State, as in they have a good defensive line, they have a good pass rush with those guys, but they bring a lot more exotic blitzes than Ohio State does, which could make them more difficult to defend. But also, when you do those things and you stunt and you whatever the case may be, you do leave opportunities for big plays, especially in the run game. It's harder to be gap sound when you're stunting. It's harder to make sure you have all your gaps covered. You're really banking on disruption in the backfield to ruin the play. And if you're able, as an offense, to get around that or to get by that, see you later, Scooter. So that's kind of the mindset there. Shawn, Al Golden, obviously, are going to be a big part of this conversation, but I wanted to give the kind of outline of the defense before I turn it over to you. Maybe you want to talk about some players as well.
Yeah. Yeah, from watching them, I am definitely happy that we went up against Boise State before them, because they do so much of what Boise does now. Like you said, I think they're more successful at getting after the quarterback, which is 4 guys, than Boise is, because Boise was very, very reliant on blitzing, and Notre Dame blitzes a lot too. But a lot of what they do is just moving horizontally along the defensive line with stunting, with looping, and that's a lot of how they get their pressure. But then their whole defense is really built around Xavier Watts. I mean, he's kind of what makes that engine go, just sitting back there and kind of lurking. They let him roam, and he's the playmaker, and he's going to make plays in that back end of the defense. Feels like Notre Dame always has a good safety. Harrison Smith, Kyle Hamilton, like good safety history, a lot
Absolutely.
like Penn State. In that way. So he is just next in line, and that's going to be what his main job is going to be. I know we talked a little bit offline in here last week about Schuler. He's the guy that Cory pointed out actually in our texting privately. He's probably going to be on Warren a lot. He's typically the one that deals with the tight ends. Now, do I think they could mix that? They can mix that up a little bit. Sure, I think they're going to put other guys onto Warren. They're going to try to bracket him. I think they're going to try to do a lot of what Ohio State did. I don't now, as good as these guys are, I don't think there's anybody quite as good as Caleb Downs. And that's no knock on them. Caleb Downs is the best safety in the country, though. So I don't know how successful they'll be with that. And even against Ohio State, Warren still had some catches. Warren still did some things.
Right.
But I think they're going to give him some different looks and throw some different things at him throughout the game. And that's really the matchup to watch. Now, another way that I think we could beat this defense is by running the ball. They have, like you said, when you're aggressive, Well, that could leave you vulnerable to the run. You could become over aggressive, and Penn State could burn you with that. And thankfully, we're running the ball really, really well coming into this game. And the running game found something in the Oregon game, and it's just continued the last 2 weeks. So that's going to be how Penn State tries to beat these guys. And then Lana Tangwell on his podcast actually made a good point too. Harris, with cover one, it's a lot of man. It's a man concept. It's a man defense, and they run a lot. Harrison Wallace is one of the best receivers, at least in the Big Ten, maybe in the country against man statistically. So look for this to be a big Harrison Wallace day.
Someone's gonna have to break man, and it is interesting because I do. You mentioned Don Brown earlier. My biggest concern about Penn State going up against this defense is it turns into like that desperation game you felt like when you went up against a Don Brown defense where they're playing man coverage, your quarterback's running for his life, they're not getting open, and he's just getting sacked, and he's getting sacked, and he's getting sacked, and like you're always behind the sticks. You never established a running game, and you're just like, you're in it, right? You're like the Krusty Krabs meme at that point, and you're just no idea what's happening to you. That's my biggest concern, right? Like that is like worst case scenario is Penn State finds themselves in a like Don Brown situation at Ann Arbor, say 2016, say 2018, say 2021 or 22, whenever it was. Like that, like those kind of games stink. And that is something that like potentially could happen if Penn State's not able to establish the run. If Notre Dame's and Al Golden is able to pin their ears back, they bring pressure like a stupid amount of the time, like highest percentage of blitzing in the country. They are going to come after Drew Aller. Stats on Drew Aller are pretty good as far as when he's pressured. He's done a really good job this year. I don't think he's done an amazing job as far as like completely taking advantage of them, but he hasn't turned the ball over when he's been blitzed really this year. So he's done a really good job with that. However, he's not only going to just have to take care of the football, he's going to have to find ways to make them pay. And I think that's, the difference. It's almost like if a bear is attacking you and you got like a stick in your hand, like best thing you can do is shove that stick down that bear's throat, right? And he's not going to want to bite you if, his throat hurts. Kind of a similar mindset. Al Golden's not going to want to bite you if his throat hurts. If he gets burned a couple times and you're able to establish a running game, it's a different ball game. But if he feels like he's got you where he wants you, it could be a long day for Penn State. And again, their corners are susceptible. To your point, you talked about Trey Wallace and what they're able to do. I mean, they're really good corners. Don't get me wrong. Like they're still very, very good. Christian Gray, very good. Leonard Moore, true freshman though. You feel like there might be some opportunities there where you can win a matchup here and there. I am very curious how they cover Tyler Warren, like you said. Kind of feels like one of those games where like someone else besides Tyler Warren's going to have to step up in the passing game.
Yeah, and I kind of think the guy to watch is Harrison Wallace because Penn State generally gets man as far as the receivers go, and maybe you could even say this against zone too. We're so reliant on Warren and Wallace. Whereas I do think a guy that could step up in a game like this, because, all right, you're going to want to try to throw the ball away from you're going to try to throw the ball away from
Watts.
So good way to do that might be to try to hit, being that he's typically roaming in the middle of the field. Try to go to the sideline, down the field to an Omari Evans. Try to kind of throw it where he isn't. And I have a feeling, a lot of where we use Warren too is in the middle of the field. So he could be waiting for him in the middle of the field. So I think using the, going downfield along the sideline could be big. And that's where, Omari Evans, he typically has those Randy Moss type stats on Thanksgiving that one year, 3 catches, 150 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's going to be what we're going to be looking for from Omari Evans. Maybe not 3 touchdowns, but I'll certainly take 1.
Yeah, and you got to protect Aller enough to get him a chance, right? You got to get him down the field. You got to give him some time to be able to make that throw. And realistically, you're going to hit maybe 40% of those. So you're looking at maybe throwing 3 and hopefully hitting one of them. But I agree with that. One Take State says Lamar Aller needs to show up since Big Dome Drew won't be in the dome environment. I will concede you that it is not technically a Big Dome Drew moment, theoretically. Still going to be pretty good conditions given January 7th or January 9th. Not a dome, and I don't know how windy it's going to be. So maybe you're right as far as there not being a true Big Dome Drew moment, but it's going to be a lot better than throwing the ball in 10-degree weather against SMU. So pay attention to that, but I agree it's not technically going to be perfect.
It is not going to be a dome, but Miami, Hard Rock,
comes up pretty good.
Yeah, it's like the fans are completely covered, and they do that because of concerts, and it rains a lot in Miami. So, half dome Drew,
half dome Drew,
half covered Drew.
I think we'll take it. It's like circumcised Drew or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, we'll go with that.
The last thing I'll say about the whole defense and the man coverage too, the best thing you can do is run the ball, right? If the defensive backs, if they're playing cover 1, just think about this. So you go, spread them out. You got 2 receivers and a tight end, and you're playing cover 1. You basically got 3 guys on their defense that are not looking at the backfield. So you're very quickly limiting how many guys can help you in run support. And that's the one reason I'm like, how much zone are they going to play? Because you want to play some zone if you're Al Golden, because they can help you in run support. And the bottom line is you want to stop the run first if you're Notre Dame. So curious how they manage that, because if Penn State's able to have success in the ground, it also might take them out of man coverage, or at least might put them in a different look where maybe they're not able to do as much of it. So pay attention to that as well.
Yeah, quick passes too. Like, I would like to see maybe some across the middle stuff, drag routes. I mean, I would like to see more of that. Andy does do that, but
some mesh concepts, see if you get some pick route stuff going on.
Yeah, like I remember, like we brought up Don Brown twice already. We're gonna bring him up for a third time. I remember Ohio State, whenever they play him, that was their bread and butter all the time. Was just easy passes for Dwayne Haskins across the middle, easy passes for all those guys, JT Barrett. I would like to see that from Penn State this weekend. I wish it was the weekend, this Thursday. So that's part of what I'm looking for too, is just Drew getting the ball out of his hands quick, getting it to his guys in space.
Yeah, Mudbug brings up, can't wipe out 70 rush yards on a penalty either. That's a good point. Got to keep that holding limited. I wanted to ask you about Drake Bowen, their linebacker, number 34, 6'2", 240, big guy, tall guy, kind of looks like an old school linebacker to a sense. I'm curious what your thoughts are, and I think he is good if he can get his paws on you. But I feel like there might be a mismatch opportunity there if they can get Tyler Warren on him, or they can get Nick Singleton on him as far as passing goes. I mean, just in general, I think you feel like you might have an opportunity if it's Nick Singleton in the hole versus him as far as going 88 and out the gate. I'm not overly impressed here as far as Bowen goes. I think there might be an opportunity here.
Yeah, I think so too. Like you said, trying to get him matched up with one of the things we do like to do with Singleton is getting him involved in the passing game. So you try to get him in the open field against a guy like Bowen. It could be an opportunity there. Like you said, traditional linebacker. And yeah, I mean, they're and the bottom line is they're going to be good up front, right? But there are opportunities to beat these guys. USC had 555 yards total offense against them. So I do think, and Louisville had a pretty good day against them too. They didn't get quite that much, but when they face athletes like a Nick Singleton, like a Tyler Warren, could be mismatch central for some of these guys.
Don says Bowen, that is, has to be similar to Kobe King. I think Kobe King has more lateral quickness than Bowen does. I feel like
King is faster than I think people realize.
I just feel like Bowen kind of plays standing up a little bit. Now again, he's 6'2", so it's hard sometimes to kind of get that out of your mind that he's just going to naturally be taller. But I feel like he runs a little, standing up a little bit. I feel like he plays with higher pads. Again, I don't think he's bad by any means, but I just feel like there's an opportunity there to maybe take advantage of it. They're very good on third down conversion allowed, like top 5 in the country. Surprisingly, not overly great in rush defense. We've talked about maybe why they're kind of doing a lot of stunts up front. They're trying to make disruptive plays. Not crazy in tackles for loss either, Shawn. Like 40th in the country in tackles for loss. So not overly impressive in that area either. They just seem to find a way to do the right things at the right moments, if that makes sense. And then they shored things up in the passing defense, which is kind of their bread and butter. But again, Shawn, to me, it's not that they're overly great at anything. It's this defense is able to get so many takeaways that, not that it saves them, but, well, you can't get any yards against their defense if you don't have the football.
Yes, and that is true. And I know you brought up third down too. A lot of that is they do a good job of keeping offenses off schedule. And a lot of that is because because they have a really good secondary, and they are pretty good against the run too. Teams are in 3rd and 8s, they're in 3rd and 9s, and that's when Al Golden is able to pin his ears back a little bit and let his guys hunt. And when they hunt, they're either stopping you or they're turning you over. So a big key for Penn State's offense against this defense is going to be staying on schedule and not getting too cute and staying on schedule and not trying to, be too cute and staying on schedule. Like,
did we break you, Shawn?
No, I'm just saying I repeat things for emphasis.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's true. And again, gotta take care of the football. Just gotta find a way to take care of the football. I think it's one of those games where, I mean, you just look at the Oregon game with Drew Aller. As good of a game he had, we kind of called it like a Sean Clifford performance because his highs were really good, but his lows were really low. Kind of what the roller coaster that was Sean Clifford's tenure. He made some fantastic plays, but he also had some crippling interceptions. And in a sense, these are one of those games where, like, throw it away. Don't worry about extending the play. Live for another drive. Make them beat you. But don't give them opportunities with short fields to beat you, because they will, and they have all season against everybody. But if you go watch that Northern Illinois game, I know you can't take a lot from it. It was so long ago. But what did Northern Illinois do? They just kind of didn't let Notre Dame play their way. Notre Dame lost a turnover battle, which they rarely do. They gave up 190 yards on the ground, and they just kind of, if you go watch that, I remember watching it live, and the only thing I want to say about this Northern Illinois game, because I think it's pretty much useless to talk about, but it wasn't like Northern Illinois like had some crazy play to win the game, or they just didn't lose the game. And since then, Notre Dame has found some better weapons on offense. Faison's come along really well for them, and that was kind of an anomaly. And there was a big game letdown after A&M. So there's a lot of things going on there. But my point being, they just played, and they just didn't let Notre Dame exploit their mistakes. And I feel like you play a game like that, you're going to give yourself a good chance. But this defense is really good at not letting you play those kind of games. Maybe to wrap my thoughts up on the defense.
Yeah, I think that's all true. It's hard to get a lot from Northern Illinois first off because it was 4 months ago.
Yeah.
I mean that's a whole lifetime ago.
We're almost closer to that game this year than we are last year.
Yeah, like it was so long ago, and so many things happened during the course of a season. Like that same day, guys, we almost lost to Bowling Green. And we had to stop the mob from trying to run Tom Allen out of town after the first half. And I think we were almost leading that mob.
Maybe me,
especially Cory. I had to hold him back. But that just shows you. Now, thankfully, we ended up winning that game, or we wouldn't be talking about this right now. But that just shows you how much different it is from the beginning of the year. And is there a world where Penn State could have lost against Bowling Green? Yeah. Yeah, there is. We were losing by double digits at one point. But thankfully we won. Notre Dame did not win against Northern Illinois. And they were kind of penalized for that because they had to have a tougher path to this point Penn State and Georgia did. Well, they ended up beating Georgia. Penn State and Texas did. So that's kind of what happened there.
I got one more thing I want to say.
Yes, go ahead.
Last thing I'll say about their pass defense, I do think they're good. Go back and look and see which quarterbacks they've played this year.
Yeah.
Including Army and Navy, including some backups, whether it was USC. Virginia, quarterback, I believe, started, but the backup came in. Their best quarterback they've played to this point is probably Tyler Shuck at Louisville. And if you look at that game, Notre Dame won, but Louisville actually had more offensive yards than them. So they've won, without even looking at all the games, they've won at least 2 games this year getting outgained on offense, Louisville and Georgia. So they have played in the mud and they've won twice. But as Mama always said, don't expect to play in the mud and to come right in the house.
Yeah, and I would probably put Curtis Rourke in that too.
Yeah, he was banged up. He ate MCL tear and a broken thumb, and yeah.
I think I saw somewhere that he played through that tear the whole season.
Yeah, insane.
And Rourke had a really good year. But Indiana skated by more than just about anybody on their schedule. And then when they played Ohio State, they played Notre Dame. They kind of showed who they were a little bit. And that's just a step away from the Ohio States, Notre Dames of the world. They're just not quite on that level. So yeah, it's a and look, if Carson Beck plays, gun to my head, do I think Notre Dame still wins? I do. I do too. I haven't been crazy about this Georgia team the whole year. I know they ended up winning the SEC. But I would say this is probably the weakest SEC that I could remember. And this is the worst Georgia team since the COVID year. And all year, like I had friends texting me like, oh, Notre Dame looks really good. Look how they're shutting down Georgia. And I was just kind of perplexed. I was like, well, first off, Georgia's backup quarterback's in the game. Secondly, the whole year, Georgia was second worst in the SEC in running and rushing. So it wasn't your traditional Georgia team where they're just gonna, kind of pound you into submission and just bully you the whole game. It's just not that type of team. Now, that's not taking anything away from Notre Dame. Still a huge win for their program. They still won the SEC. They beat Texas twice. They're no slouch. But it's just important to keep things in perspective that this was one of the weaker teams that Georgia's had in the past few years. And straight up, I think if Penn State was playing Georgia, I'll tell you this, I think if Penn State was playing Georgia, I would be picking Penn State tonight.
Me too. Let's jump over to Notre Dame's offense. Again, appreciate you guys hanging out in the chat. If you have some thoughts, make sure to let them know. I haven't seen very many score predictions in there yet, so please start dropping your score predictions here. We're going to talk about the offense, and then we're going to get our own predictions. Mudbug thinks 25 points wins it. Again, make sure if you haven't already liked the video and subscribe on YouTube. We appreciate that. Lambda agrees with you, by the way. He says, save the razzle dazzle for the natty. Corey Joy says, not so fast, my friend. Bowen is a middle field infielder on a baseball team. Don't let the weight fool you. That boy can move. So there you go. Mudbug's going 27-24. Penn State wins. Let's talk about the Notre Dame offense. Riley Leonard, the transfer from Duke. 700-ish yards? I can double check that. I believe it's right around 700-ish yards. 831 rushing on the year. 5.6 yards per carry. He has 15 rushing touchdowns on the season, which, by the way, Shawn, do you know who had the single season quarterback rushing touchdown record for Notre Dame before Riley Leonard took it from him?
Brandon Wimbush.
Hell of a pull, Shawn.
I remember the Brandon Wimbush Penn State Notre Dame recruiting battle of yesteryear. And man, I was devastated when Wimbush went to Notre Dame, but I think it kind of all worked out in the end because we got Trace McSorley.
And Brandon Wimbush.
Yeah, he could run. but that's about it.
Is there a lot of comparison? I know we have one Notre Dame fan in the chat. Is that a fair comparison between I'm not saying Riley Leonard is as bad as Brandon Wimbush throwing, but is there a lot of comparisons you could draw there between Brandon Wimbush and Riley Leonard?
I think Cory answered that better than I could.
Yeah.
But Riley Leonard, I'll give him this. He's won.
He's a winner, and he's got a moxie.
Yes. So that's something you could always give Leonard over Wimbush, because those Notre Dame teams were, not that they were horrible, but they were Brian Kelly Notre Dame teams. You never took them seriously as a national championship threat. I never did. As I was like, they're going to lose the first good team they play, because that's just what Notre Dame does. They were the Cowboys of college football. You just knew, well, when the going gets tough, they will lose, like they always do. And this is a different field than this Notre Dame team, and I will give them that. Like, I think this is the best Notre Dame team of my lifetime. I try to call it like I see it, even with teams that I don't necessarily like. Like, I hate the Boston Celtics. Boston Celtics are probably going to repeat this year. But what are you going to do? I'm not going to tell you that they suck, because they don't. Ohio State has probably the best team in the country.
Riley Leonard's a winner, and I think that's probably the most important part of him. He finds ways to get the job done. But if you go back and look at like his statistics from year to year, I mean, there's not a bunch of games on here where he's throwing the ball all over the place. And if it is, it's against some really terrible teams like Temple. Last year in 2023, which at Duke, he played against Notre Dame, which I think is always fun. Against Notre Dame last year, which they lost 21-14. It was a really fun game. He went 12 of 27 for $134, a touchdown, and a pick. Against Louisville, which I believe that was the game he got hurt in. He went 9 of 23, 121, and a pick. So there's a lot of games last year he struggled to get over 200 yards passing, even in the ACC. And you go forward to this year, still not throwing the ball a ton. The most passing attempts he ever had in a game was 33 versus Virginia, in which they won 35-14. Just look at some of these games. Army, 10 of 13 attempts. Stanford, he threw it 22 times. Purdue, he threw it 16 times, even though they won 66-7. I don't think he stayed in for that for the entire game there. But even against Georgia, 24 attempts. What I'm trying to get out of here, Shawn, is, and this is probably just true for all college quarterbacks for the most part, they do not want him to throw the football unless he has to. Again, we always talked about it with Sean Clifford. I don't think we ever put a name to it, but we were always like, if Sean Clifford can throw less than 30 attempts, Penn State was like what? Like, it was something stupid. It's like 20-0-1 or some bologna and cheese. Like, yeah. It was stupid good how good they did when he would throw for less than 30 attempts. And you could probably translate that all of college football with a couple exceptions. Riley Leonard is not one of those exceptions. They do not want to see him throw the ball more than 30 times in this football game.
Yeah. In general, Notre Dame is not a team that wants to come from behind. Now, they're very good when they get up on you. Very good. But if they have to come back and they need Leonard to make some throws, I'm not entirely sure how much Notre Dame is going to trust him to make them. Now, I think it'll take a long time for Notre Dame to ever abandon the run, and things would have to really be going wrong for them to do that, because they're going to live by the run and die by the run.
Right.
Because that's just who they are. That's their identity. They have an identity, and they're going to stick to it. But you know something, Cory? Looking at this Notre Dame offense, it reminds me a little. Now, I don't think they're quite as good. Reminds me a little bit of Michigan's offense from last year, in that they love to just keep on the ground, pound the ball. Now, Leonard can't throw like McCarthy could, and they don't have a Roman Wilson, but they have a good tight end. They have good receivers. They have good backs. They have a really good line. And the thing that makes their offense really go, kind of like Michigan's last year, was that mobility from the quarterback. So if you're able to contain Riley Leonard, we're probably going to be successful. If you're letting him run wild, then it's going to be a bad night for your Nittany Lions.
I think it's a really good point. I mean, everyone just completely crapped on Indiana because it was like the first game. In hindsight, you go back and look at that game, 27-17 was the final. I know Indiana got, a late score there. Riley Leonard, 11 carries, 30 yards, 2.7 yards per carry, and a touchdown. Now, that does include sacks, but still, his best run, 8 yards that day. So they did a pretty good job against Riley Leonard as far as, keeping him under wraps. And again, you're right. That Notre Dame Georgia game was 100% going to be 3-3 at the half, and Notre Dame was going to be completely okay with that.
Yep.
If UGA doesn't turn the ball over there right before the half, they would have been totally cool. 3-3, we get the ball, start the second half, and guess what we're going to do? We're going to do the same damn thing. But Shawn, I got to stop and ask you, haven't Penn State seen this before? I mean, they have gone up against teams like Boise State as of most recently that we are going to run it, and we're going to run it some more, and then we're going to just hope that you make a mistake, whether that's a Burt Bielema Illinois team, who I think if you can beat Brett Bielema at what I think Notre Dame's trying to do, you can beat anybody because nobody does it like Burt. They've seen this multiple times this year. And I like your kind of comparison to Michigan because without that threat to the outside, I don't know how much Penn State is concerned with Notre Dame's attack. Like, they have the speed to match up with them, especially with Jeremiah Love being hurt. Like, they got to feel pretty good where they can even lock in even more on Riley Leonard. And I guess my thoughts are, shouldn't they be ready for this?
They should. I mean, look at even SMU. Now SMU throws the ball a lot more, but just from a mobility perspective from the quarterback. So yeah, I mean, Penn State. I always kind of thought of Notre Dame as a quasi Big Ten team. Like, first of all, back in the day, they used to play Michigan every year. They used to play Michigan State every year. They used to play Purdue every year. They don't do that as much, if at all, anymore. They don't have those series anymore with them, sadly, because I always thought those were pretty good games. It was a good gut check for all those teams. I always knew how good Michigan State was going to be, how good Michigan was going to be after the Notre Dame game. But they were very, very similar. I think if they ever join a conference, they should be forced to join a conference at some point. They'll join the Big Ten, and they'll fit right in because they do very, very similar things. I liked your comparison to Illinois, because now they're much better offense than Illinois. He's
much more electric with his feet than Altmaier, obviously.
Yes.
But I don't think he's necessarily any better of a thrower than Altmaier.
No, Altmaier is.
I don't think Altmaier's a bad thrower. Yeah, I'm not trying to say Altmaier's bad.
Yeah, like
he's an Altmaier with better legs. Is that a fair comparison?
Never thought of it like that, but yeah, probably. And think about it this way, Cory. Are there 5 quarterbacks in the Big Ten better than Luke Altmaier? Probably not.
No,
like,
I don't think so.
If you think about it, and I don't think he's electric or anything, but like you said, but like we were saying, the Leonard's legs are what makes him a really good player. And I think when you lack that explosivity in the passing game, which Notre Dame does, I mean, they just don't go downfield a ton. You're going to have to make up for it in different ways. And kind of like, again, we keep seeing kind of mirror images, kind of like Boise. Their explosivity came from the run game, and it's the same thing with Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame does it with their backs, but they also do it with the quarterback. And Riley Leonard's capable of going and taking the ball 30 to 40 yards if he gets loose. So those are the types of things that we have to prevent. And really, in a situation like this, especially with Abdul Carter having a broken wing or whatever he's got, it's not a break. I'm just kidding.
Clipped wing.
Yeah, clipped wing. That's a better way to put it.
I got you. That's what I'm here for you.
Yes, I am not reporting anything because it's clipped. With him having that, well, he's well suited to just chase Riley Leonard around the field all night, and I'm very happy if that's our game plan with him.
I agree with that. And I don't mean any disrespect. I think a lot of people that maybe haven't watched Luke Altmaier, he's a decent quarterback, especially with his arm. But I think you have to just see, and I think that the game plan is similar for both teams, right? Both defenses aren't going to respect your passing game. I do think Penn State has more explosivity. I was crazed by the statistic on Penn State actually, I think, is tied or slightly ahead of Ohio State in explosive plays per game or percentages, which is just insane to me.
I am also.
And like passing explosive plays, like they're very close, which again is just crazy to me. Now, keep in mind, that's not the exact same Ohio State team we've seen the entire season, but still kind of wild when you think about it like that. Riley Leonard, what his biggest, concern I have with him is he is not just slippery, he's deceptively quick. He is going to pick up first downs when we don't want him to. But again, didn't we just see that with Kevin Jennings?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, like people are like completely just disrespecting Kevin Jennings at this point, which I don't think is fair. Kevin Jennings, even when he was running around for his whole life, was still making a lot of Penn State's defenders look silly at times. Like he did a couple plays where I was like, oh, good thing this game's not close because that was nice.
Yeah.
So haven't they just seen that too?
Yes. Now you could say, well, they're totally different offenses. Yeah, but that's not really the point. Like the point is how elusive these quarterbacks could be. And yes, Kevin Jennings, he moved like now Franklin, I think was trying to. He's been doing this thing with the guys, trying to make every opposing player that we're playing against seem like the best player ever. And I remember him comparing. I think he compared Jennings a couple times to Lamar Jackson. Like I said, part of it I think is to get in players' heads a little bit. But he moves really well, and he is hard to get a hand on. And I would say he's probably a little shiftier than Riley Leonard. Now, Riley Leonard has good, straight speed, but he probably isn't as shifty. So, yeah, I mean, I think this definitely helps you prepare for a guy like that. And Jennings had negative yards rushing at the end of the day. Now, sack yards included in that. But if we're able to get that against Riley Leonard, well, it's going to be a good day on Thursday for us.
Let's talk about the offensive line. I remember when this Notre Dame team was going to A&M at the beginning of the year, and they were going to start, I don't know how many it was at that time. I think it was 3 guys that were freshmen. Might have been 2. I think it was pretty sure it was 3. One or 2 of them had never started a game before or something like that. And I was like, how are they going to go into A&M 12th man and find a way to win? I decided that way, and they completely passed the test against A&M in that environment. Young offensive line. Look, I don't know if they deserve to win the Joe. I think they gave the Joe Moore Award to Army. I don't know about that. I don't know if Notre Dame deserved to win it this year, but holy smokes, if they're not the number 1 offensive line next year, I don't know who's going to be. Like another full year in the weight room, another full year to develop in the kind of.
It's gonna be right here in State College.
It's possible. That's totally
honestly,
possible.
I'm not even kidding about that. It very well could be.
We'll see. We'll see where everyone goes and who decides to stay. But I agree, Penn State's going to be very good too. But they have a great offensive line, and they do a really good job of moving people. They do a really good job of locking on to people. And I don't want to say that they necessarily keep Riley Leonard upright because I think he does a good job of doing that himself. In the limited times where they ask them to truly drop back and sit in the pocket, they do a good enough job. They're not going to ask this offensive line to do that a bunch against Penn State. I promise you that right now. They're going to run the ball, and when they do have to pass it, they're going to give Riley Leonard an opportunity to get out on the edge to either throw it or to run it. They're not going to just sit back there and let Denai Dennis Sutton, Amin Vanover, and Abdul Carter eat. That's why we're talking about how the spy, like you said, Shawn, might be one of the most important things is spying Riley Leonard because that's probably what's going to end up being one of the best ways they're going to move the sticks on third down situations. So, but that offensive line is gonna pound you. It's gonna gruel you. And again, it might not be in the first quarter, but their goal is to start wearing you down over the course of the game. With Jeremiah Love, it only takes a seam. We'll be curious to see if that's the case without him or with him in limited fashion. But this offensive line's for real.
Yeah, like you said, I think the thing that surprises me the most when you watch them is how young they are, because they're already playing at such a high level. Now, I do think they could be susceptible to. I know I know one of their linemen, Rocco Spindler, who's actually his father's from my area. He's from West Scranton. Played at Pitt, and I know he has a bum ankle right now.
That's their guard, correct?
That's their guard. Penn State recruited him as well. So I know he's been a little bit banged up, and the thing that makes me feel better though is, yeah, they're young, and you know what our defensive line is not? They ain't young. I mean, I think his Izzard, I think he's going to be collecting Social Security next year. Smith
And
Milford
Devon
already
J.
is.
Thomas. Devon J. Thomas. Devon J.
Yes.
Thomas, 6-year guy.
Yeah, Devon J. Thomas. Our guys, these aren't young pups. I mean, these guys are men, and that's something that I'm not sure if there's a better combination of both talent and experience in the country than Penn State's defensive line. And I think that has the chance to be a differentiator in this game. Now, again, Notre Dame's offensive line is very good. They pride themselves on that offensive line. They have a good offensive line every single year. And this year's no exception. But I think where we could get after them is confusing them with some looks. Tom Allen has been a little bit more in his bag the past couple weeks. And I think you might see that a little bit more. And really, Cory, when you're playing against a team like this, do you need to be in your bag all that much? Because you know what they're going to do. And this is no slight to them. I think it's always impressive when you know a run is coming and they're still able to do it. You don't really need to get all that creative. If you could, again, use that experience and then the linebackers behind them to be gap sound. I mean, if we're able to do that, we're going to be able to slow these guys down.
Give you an idea, Notre Dame is 74th in sacks allowed against the FBS Power 4, Power 5. Penn State not much better, sitting there at 70, just to be completely transparent. Tackles for loss allowed. Notre Dame is sitting there at 36 in the country, and that is just total. So take that for what you will. I mean, they're not top 5 in those statistics, which you could say that for what you will, but a lot of the other really great teams are. So receiving core, we talked about Faison a lot. He's technically the third on their totals are now. Bo Collins, Jaden Greathouse have more catches and have more yards than them. Not a bunch of touchdowns with this group as far as receiving goes. You got Bo Collins has 3, Greathouse has 1, Faison has 1. The tight end you mentioned, Mitchell Evans, has 3. Jeremiah Love has 2. Mostly because Love and Leonard have 31 touchdowns on the ground. You throw in Price and they're at 38. So you can only score so many touchdowns. Not a lot of them are coming through the air. All 3 of those receivers I mentioned are averaging 12 yards per catch. So take that for what you will. I think Faison's got to be the kind of guy to pay attention to. He's really come on in the last. He had a good game against Indiana. He seems to kind of step up in some big moments. He didn't play against Northern Illinois, so if you're looking for another comparison, he didn't play against Northern Illinois either. So I mentioned Jaden Harrison. He's the one to have the kick return for a touchdown. So I just wanted to shed light on him again. You see that they do get the ball to their back some. 25 catches for Love, 13 for Aeneas Williams, who sometimes comes down on 3rd down. Not like they do with like Nick Singleton in Penn State. They're not getting Nick Singleton and Katron level catches, but they'll get them involved when possible.
Yeah, like you said, they don't have a receiver with over 500 yards receiving this year. Nobody in the passing game. And then, I mean, I also thought it was interesting. It took Riley Leonard till game 4 to throw his first touchdown pass. So
I tried to move on from Riley Leonard, and you just sucked us right back into the.
Well, no, I'm just kind of using that. I'm using it to buttress. There's a word for you.
That an SAT word?
I think so. It means to support. To support my point. That yeah, like when you I actually asked my buddy Cory, who's a guy on Notre Dame's offense that people don't talk enough about, and he mentioned Jaden Greathouse. So guy that I'd be looking for. Hasn't done a whole lot the past few games, but again, Notre Dame hasn't been heavily reliant on the passing game in the past few games. And yeah, Faison has that speed, and he has really come on lately since the playoffs have started. So to me, if there's a receiver that you really have to worry about in this one, it would be Faison.
Great house. We'll see how great he is.
Might be like mid-house.
Oh man, people are. If you're a Notre Dame fan, you just tuned out. You're like, these guys are just homers at this point. Try to be pretty, right down the middle, but that's never going to be realistic.
I feel like we've been fair to Notre Dame tonight, though.
Yeah,
as fair as we could be.
And
yes,
I'm waiting for you just to go off on a tangent about how much you hate them, but maybe you're saving that for the predictions.
Oh yeah,
we talked about running backs. I feel like a decent amount, so I think we're good there. We didn't really talk a lot about Penn State yet tonight. So before, and again, I don't think we got that many more predictions. I saw Mudbug went to 34-17. Corey Joyce went 27-12 Notre Dame. Cowboy Ribeye said basically a dome environment for Big Dome Drew. So Cowboy Ribeye, appreciate that. We talk about our team all the time. So maybe that's why we don't talk about them a lot during our previews. But Shawn, I'm just like, where are you at with these guys? Like, do you think it's a game where you think the running backs could get going? Do you think it's a game where we need the receivers to do things? Do you think, even though we kind of outlined it, not likely that Tyler Warren gets involved? Do you think this is, Big Dome Drew's day? I mean, I'm just curious your thoughts on if Penn State were to move the ball, or if you don't think they're going to be able to move the ball, kind of why to either of those? What's going to be maybe what the position group that we should be paying attention to for Penn State?
The offensive line in general. I didn't think the offensive line played their best game against Boise State. I thought the run blocking was great, but pass blocking, they got us a few times, and Notre Dame blitzes a lot as well, and they have better players than Boise State. So I think the key for Penn State is to hold up in pass protection. And if they're able to do that, then yeah, I mean, you're going to give Drew a lot of time to work. We talked about Notre Dame secondary. It's a good secondary. You're going to give, and guys are going to be able to get open. So I think holding up in the offensive line, particularly in pass protection, of course, we want to continue running the ball well. I think the offensive line is the most important component in this, most important position in this game. Because people will bring up the receivers and everything, but I kind of think we could win this on the ground. I do. I think if it's not moving on the ground, we're probably not going to win. But I do think that run game could open up some things in the passing game. If Notre Dame has to worry about that because of how aggressive they play. If they get caught with their pants down a few times, well, they may have to go back and reconsider it a little bit of being as aggressive.
Reconsider wearing pants altogether.
Yeah. They'll be thinking about, I'm not even going to say it.
Okay. I was wondering where you're going to go there. Yeah, to me, like, I just keep coming back to the quarterbacks, right? Something I feel like I've always thought this way all the way back to when the Bears played the Colts in the Super Bowl. And it felt like it was a really even game what was going to be an even game between the Colts and the Bears. And Peyton Manning versus Rex Grossman wasn't a great matchup, but the Bears defense is so good. What was going to happen in that football game? And I don't remember who told me it, but they're always like, if you're ever not sure about a game, the quarterback is going to be the difference in those games. So those kind of coin flip games, especially the neutral site games where the home crowd isn't involved.
It was in Miami too.
It was in Miami.
That's
so that's a
Super
good
Bowl
point.
It rained, yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Shout out to Devin Hester. That to me is kind of where I'm at with this is both of these guys make plays in their own right. They also sometimes, aren't getting the credit for being the reason their teams are there either. Right. And so who has a better day, I think, is going to be the difference in this one. And honestly, the funniest thing is a better day might be who's taking care of the football.
Yeah. Turnover differential is going to be huge in this one because Notre Dame is at their. That's just it's part of their defensive DNA is being able to turn you over and being able to give their offense short fields with those turnovers. So yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying too about the quarterback, and we keep talking about signature moments, right? Feels like we need Drew Aller's signature moment already, because it almost feels like his signature moment was in a loss against Oregon, and that's not really the way it's supposed to be. So I think we're all collectively waiting for that signature moment from him. And maybe you could say it was against USC, but at the end of the day, guys, USC was a 7-win team.
Yeah.
It was a great football game. And he had to be really good down the stretch. And if he wasn't, again, we're not here.
Shout out
But
Julian Fleming.
yes, shout out Julian Fleming. But at the end of the day, that wasn't going against a team like Notre Dame.
Are we ready?
Let's do it.
Again, thank you guys for hanging out with us. We're a bunch of degenerates are in the chat that have hung out with us for like hour and a half ish.
Yeah, an hour and a half.
Appreciate that. Being with us this long awaited moment here to get into our predictions. I will be going down for the game, so this is why we're doing our predictions. Honestly, this is about when we would do them anyway, given the 2 days away from the game ish anyway.
Yeah, we're
So,
actually a little late this week because we usually do it Wednesday into Saturday.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
But people have another day to commute to work because it's on a weekday.
Yes. I'm actually off on Thursday.
Look at that.
Yeah, federal employees for President Carter's day of mourning. So.
Oh, look at that.
Yep.
That just meant to be, I feel like.
Yeah, I get that day off. And I had the national championship game off, too, because of Martin Luther King Day.
Shout out to the king.
Indeed.
All right. I think I go first.
Yeah, I think it's you.
Shit. No, I have my prediction ready. Don's real prediction, by the way, 21-13 Penn State wins. So glad you didn't just take my prediction, Donnie, right before I went into mine and be kind of pissed at you. Finally here, Penn State, Notre Dame, prediction time. Decided early this morning on what my prediction was going to be. Really was bouncing back and forth on this one. I have been pretty, I guess, against Penn State in my predictions so far this year. Been a smidgen of a wet blanket to a certain degree, if you would go that far. I am just blown away by where Penn State is. You could make the argument that they have a handful of good players, but they've really came together as a team and really blown away my expectations for how far this team could go. I understand why people think the goalposts have moved and why they need to win this game to vindicate the season. I'm kind of halfway between that and halfway between it's gravy. They've won 2 playoff games, and they are one of the 4 best teams in the country. And I think, although it won't be celebrated enough if they lose, is important to remember in hindsight of all of this. Notre Dame's got a good football team. They know how to win games they shouldn't. They know how to get in the mud and throw rocks at one another. They got a really good football team that knows how to take care of the football and also how to get a lot of turnovers, which is usually not a great recipe. I really think if Penn State's going to win this game, the best players on their team need to act like the best players. And I don't know how much we see from Abdul Carter. I don't know how much we see from Jeremiah Love. But overall, I think Penn State is going to win this football game. I finally think Drew Aller is at a place where he can carry this one over the finish line. I mentioned in the show, I think whoever has the better day at quarterback is going to win this football game. And I think Drew Aller is a better quarterback. I also think Drew Aller is the best quarterback that Notre Dame has faced this season. And I don't think it's that close. I really think this pass defense for Notre Dame has been a little inflated. And I think Drew Aller and company are going to have more success than Riley Leonard and company are going to have against the Penn State defense. I don't expect it to be a barn burner, but I do expect Penn State to have enough success to put Notre Dame in a situation where they're not as comfortable. And because of that, Penn State's able to get the win. Red zone, red zone, red zone. You know, I love the red zone. Penn State #1 in the country in red zone touchdown percentage allowed. Less than 40% of the time that defenses get in the red zone, they score touchdowns against Penn State. We know that Marcus Freeman likes to go for it in deep in the red zone instead of kicking cheap field goals. I think that perhaps is going to be the demise and the difference in this one. And I think Penn State's able to win this one. Don't exactly know how they get there, but I'm going 24-23. Nittany Lions win. My bold prediction, and I usually don't think this is that bold, but given the fact that Notre Dame is very good at takeaways, is that Penn State wins a turnover battle.
All right. So this is a big one for everybody, obviously. And look, guys, I've never wanted this one more because it's big for a few reasons. Number one, Penn State's never played in a national championship game in my lifetime. Last time we were in one was 1986. And that was 9 years before I was born, and I'm no spring chicken. Some of you will say I am, but I'm going to be 30 years old this month, so I've been around a while. So there's that, and we're playing Notre Dame. And for a kid growing up in Manuka here in Scranton, it means something. I spoke to Donnie Collins last night, and he made a good point to me. I think this might be the biggest game in the history of Scranton. Now, that might not mean anything to any of you. It probably doesn't. But what I can tell you is this rivalry means something to a lot of people, especially in Eastern Pennsylvania. You Yinzers, I mean, you still hate Pitt with every fiber of your being, even though you don't play Pitt anymore. That's how Penn State fans feel about Notre Dame out here. That's how Notre Dame fans feel about Penn State here. So combine that with the chance to go to the national championship. I mean, this is everything. It really is. This isn't just, another regular season game against Ohio State where we play Ohio State every year. And look, every year you want to win it, but you don't know if you win this game, you're going to go to the national championship, where in this one you do. Now the game itself, because I wanted to get all that out of the way. Game itself. I've had a pretty good read on this team all year long. Beginning of the year, I picked Penn State to go 11-1, only lost to Ohio State. Again, during Ohio State week, I stuck with my prediction that Ohio State would beat Penn State. Big Ten championship game, I picked Oregon to beat Penn State. They did. SMU picked Penn State. Boise State picked Penn State. So I do think I have a pretty good read on what this team is. With that, and with Notre Dame, again, I think this is the best Notre Dame team in my lifetime. I feel pretty good about this one, guys. I think Penn State I think we're going to get it done. I think when you look at how Penn State matches up with them, when you look at who Notre Dame has played, the games where they did get, I don't want to say gash, but a USC game, if you give up half of 1,000 yards against the team in one game, that's pretty much gashed. It's against more talented teams, and I don't think Notre Dame's played a team like Penn State all year. I think Penn State's passing offense has been a little bit even overlooked in the press because of the lack of receivers, and we don't have a true number one receiver, which is true. But I think a guy like Harrison Wallace is going to play a big game. And I think he's going to be set up by that with the run game. So, bold prediction, I do think Penn State, I'm going to say that Harrison Wallace has over 100 yards receiving. I think he has a lot of chain moving plays, and I think he's going to beat them deep once. So, going to say Harrison Wallace is the guy people are going to be talking about after this game. People will know more after this game. I'm taking Penn State to win this by a score of 24-16.
Two surprises for me there. Trey Wallace over 100 yards. I think that's a very good pick. A lot of people, I think, are talking about Omari Evans right now. People are starting to maybe forget a little bit about Trey Wallace. And remember, Trey Wallace from Alabama. He's back down south. See if he can, pull that inside of him and think about something there. And also, I'm a little surprised that you went with an 8-point win. I mean, not that that doesn't mean it's a close game, but that's a little bit more than I feel like a lot of people else are giving right now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be one of those, like it might be 17-16 in the last few minutes, and we scored an insurance touchdown. So I think it's going to be close. I think Notre Dame's very, very, very good. But I just think Penn State's better. I think we're just the better team. And I think we're going to the national championship, which is pretty cool to say. God, I hope I'm right, because it's going to suck if we lose. But I think we're going to. Which is pretty awesome. And then whatever happens there, happens there. But just win this one. Just get there so I don't have to hear from Notre Dame fans for like 100 years about that year that they beat Penn State in the Final Four. You guys have seen Cory Joyce in the chat tonight. You're going to have to hear from him. I would have to hear from him the rest of my life if we lose this game, amongst other people. And Cory's one of the less obnoxious ones.
Yeah. You got a lot of supporters. You got Mudbug going, let's go. You got Cowboy Ribeye saying, Cook boys, lock the fuck in. Mudbug said, fire me up. People are jacked up right now. I'll just say this. I know Cowboy Ribeye just put in a chat 1-0. But just making the assumption that Ohio State beats Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And Penn State has a chance to play Ohio State. Forget about, slaying the demon for a second, and forget about, it's hard to beat the second team twice. Let's just assume that Ohio State continues on this tear, and they beat Texas by 14. Penn State would be playing with house money. There'd be no pressure. It'd be just, what do you put on top of mashed potatoes?
Gravy.
Just be gravy. That's all it would be. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Shawn, I haven't even spoke with you. I will let you know. I can pretty much, I don't know what your thoughts are. I'm thinking a Sunday show.
Yeah, that'll work, I think.
So we'll be back on Sunday night to recap the game and potentially preparing for a national championship. Thank you guys so much for hanging out in the chat. Make sure you've liked the video on YouTube so management's happy. I didn't even mention, but we have a store. I will put it on X after this in just a second. There's a PSU shop. There's LTFI shirts in there. So go lock the F in and buy one. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen. And we'll be back on Sunday. For Shawn Kane, I'm Cory Lestochi. You've been listening to Hardcore Penn State Football. See you on Thursday.